Okay, good evening, everyone. Thank you very much for coming and for participating in our talk. We're calling this series Tools for Living and Parenting, and especially with all the turn that's going on now, there are so many different skills and parenting issues that we should be talking about. And I think perhaps the most appropriate one to start with is my dear friend, Dr. Elly Lasson. Thank you very much, Dr. Elly, for participating. We're talking about job and career readiness. Dr. Elly Lasson is a professor and program director at University of Maryland, as well as working as an organizational consultant for various clients. He led the very successful Job Link organization in the frum community of Baltimore, and is very active in the area of career counseling and helping people navigate workplace issues. Dr. Elly attended high school at Torah Academy of Baltimore and learned in Yeshiva Ner Yisrael. He received his academic degrees from University of Maryland and Wayne State University, where he earned a PhD in organizational psychology. He lives in Baltimore with his wife Shandi and is in his third cycle of Daf Yomi. Kol hakavod for that. Really, kol hakavod for everything. I'd like to just start, Dr. Elly, before I thought of something that one of my rebbeim said a very long time ago, and I think it's so appropriate here. If you look at the davening, the prayers on Yom Kippur, the Kohen Gadol goes into the Kodesh Kodashim, and that's the height of the Avodah, right? And there was a big Beis HaMikdash, and there was the place with the Mizbeach, and inside the Kodesh Kodashim, the Holy Ark, that was the place. So you have the holiest person of the Jewish people, right? The Kohen Gadol, at the holiest time of the year on Yom Kippur, in the holiest place in the world. And you would think that he would pray for spiritual matters, right? You would think that at that point in time, he would daven to be close to Hashem, that we should be Zaycha to Mashiach. And I'm going to read you the tefillah. V'kach chaysa tefilasa shel Kohen Gadol. What did the Kohen Gadol daven for? Yiratzim Lefanecha, Hashem, you should, Rabbanu Shloim, we daven to you that the year coming for the Bnei Yisrael should be a year filled with rain. Most of the people are farmers in those days. And please don't accept the tefillos of the people who are traveling because they don't want rain. And Bnei Yisrael should not need parnasa. They shouldn't need to go to each other for charity. They should have parnasa. And my Rebbe said that there was really something fascinating, that we tend sometimes to appropriately think of the spiritual realm, but the importance of parnasa, especially today, is so important. And that's what this talk is about. It's about helping parents and help you guide your children, and talk about the job market for adults also. If I can start, Dr. Elly, I remember discussing this with you back when I was lecturing in the shul, at least 10 years ago, wasn't it? In Shomrei. You had mentioned then about the idea of a job and a career.
Like that, yeah.
I'm sorry? You had mentioned then at the time about a job and a career. And, the title is Job and Career Readiness. Can you just talk about that, please? I remember listening with great interest when you explained it to me.
Thank you. First of all, it's a pleasure to be here to participate in this series that you're doing this week. I think it's a very important series. So tonight, we're going to, of course, talk about some of the practical tools and strategies. And I think it really is an opportunity because of the way that the world has gone right now. There are some great opportunities for parents to have conversations with their children. One of those conversations is maybe to make the distinction between a job and a career. The way I see a job is a snapshot in time where somebody gets a job, and we all have different jobs, that we can think about: a part-time job, a temporary job, if you will. But what is perhaps more important, for a variety of reasons, is to take a job and use that as a pathway, as a stepping stone towards a career. Because ultimately, it's going to be a career that will define a person to a great extent. It will define perhaps earning potential. It will define what the person brings to the table for an organization. That is, the old adage is that it's not a sprint, it's a marathon. And I think that sometimes people are focused on getting a job, which might not be in the long-term best interest. So a career is a really series of steps that hopefully will allow for growth in terms of parnasa, in terms of responsibility, in terms of meaningfulness. So I think that's an important distinction to make between those two.
Thank you. And what would you say, so what would you suggest that, parents should be doing with their kids? He's mentioned about having discussions with them. Could you elaborate, please?
Yeah, so I think that a parent is, or both parents, I should say, if that is the family structure, of course, are in a unique position to understand the child's strengths and weaknesses. And some of that is driven by acumen, by kishrun, by having gone to PTA meetings, have gotten that feedback, have gotten report cards. It's just knowing your kid. Obviously, I think one of the big things that you probably have spoken and thought about is the partnership, the chinuch partnership between parents and children. But I do think that, and this goes back to the Gemara in Kedushin, the famous Gemara that, according to my Rebbe, he points out that there's nobody that argues with that responsibility that a father, that the parents have to teach their kid a parnasa, something that is appropriate, something that is ethical, something that is moral. But I think that the conversation should start as early as possible, at least to identify those areas where there could be a landing point. So, for example, some kids are just not math kids. So for those kids, putting them into a pathway towards accounting or a financial analyst, something that's very quantitative, would probably not be the best. Strategy. So it really is a matter of the parent trying to pick up on areas of strength that the child brings to the table. And it doesn't necessarily have to be technical strengths. It could be just interpersonal skills, because interpersonal skills and soft skills, as we call them, are really a significant part of career accomplishment. So I think that the parent knows the child better than anyone else. The second thing that I would recommend is, when I was at JobLink, we spoke about this, the board members spoke about this, and I wrote about this, and that is the idea of a plan with a capital P. And a plan is not necessarily something that's written in stone. You don't necessarily have to say, okay, well, it's July 25th. Okay, I need to do this with my life. But it should at least be a strategic plan that the parents make with the child. And sometimes that's going to be towards Klei Kodesh, sometimes that's going to be towards a profession. But there should be something that is a roadmap, at least, that is discussed and articulated. And also, I think that one of the gets a little bit touchy at times, and that is, having some sort of in that plan, having some sort of exit strategy. Once again, not to say, okay, I'm going to go out to the workforce at such and such a date, but in many respects, it's going to be the parent that's going to impact and influence the child, and should really be in a position to influence the child about when to start on that pathway. Sometimes that pathway includes education. Sometimes it includes an internship in the summer, or a regular position. And finally, I'll just mention, we have this adage, I think it's from Pirkei Avos, but it's Aseh Lecha Rav, right? Aseh Lecha Rav Kinei Lecha Chaver. Whether it's from Pirkei Avos or a different place, I don't recall exactly, but we all have heard that, and I'm a big believer in not only having a Rebbe. I have one primary Rebbe, and I have other rabbeim who are mentors to me in a spiritual and religious sense. I'm not talking about psak halacha per se, but I'm saying in terms of just derech hachayim. But also having a professional mentor, a mentor. Sometimes that person can be from, sometimes that person is outside of the community, somebody who's been there, done that, who can help you navigate that pathway and hopefully let you know whether you need to make any adjustments. So I think in terms of what can be done in the here and now, having that conversation, of course, is so important. And setting the child up, I don't want to say child because sometimes it's a young man or young woman, towards accomplishment and a pathway towards that accomplishment.
You know, I just would direct a few words. Thank you so much, Doctor. That was spot on, as always. I would mention something to younger parents and parents of elementary school children, and I do tell this to parents very often, is that you should really pick a high school for your child starting in high school. You know, elementary schools, they usually, you go with what's near your home, but you should really ask the head of school what their philosophy is about college and what their philosophy is about kollel, and either way is okay. But I think it's so important. A lot of times parents set themselves up for a conflict because they might like the look of a particular yeshiva, you know, or they might like the chevra of the yeshiva, but you can't blame kids for doing what you ask them to do. You know, as you want them to go to school, if you send them to a school where the head of the school says, look, our path is we want all our talmidim to go to kollel for a few years, and that's fine. But it should be congruent with your lifestyle. You can't come to them later at the end of, you know, in the senior year and say, okay, which college are you going to? You know, that's just, you know, having been in chinuch for almost 40 years and guided families. I think that's an important thing to mention, especially to younger parents, before your kids get into that setting. And the other thing is, you mentioned, Dr. Elly, about an internship. You know, to get an internship, I think parents should be more outspoken about their values. We had our kids every Chodesh Nisan, when they went to high school, they were off the entire 2 weeks before Pesach and 1 week afterwards. I insisted that the kids had to get a job, and none of their friends did. And, you know, one of them clerked at an attorney. You know, all right, I was manning yeshiva. I was able to, you know, I was able to help them out like that. One of them cashed a hotel up in the Catskills. And, you know, we matched them dollar for dollar, my wife and I. And if they kept the money in the bank for 6 months, we doubled it again. You know, so I think parents should, if you want your children to have this level of responsibility, I think it's helpful. What do you think about career counseling? Doctor, you mentioned about parents knowing their children.
Right. Well, listen, I do career counseling. Most of it really focuses on adults who have been in jobs at some point. But there is, I think what you're talking about is maybe what we call career assessment. There are tools that are used.
Yes, thank you.
Yeah, so they're I would just call it a diagnostic tool that it has its pluses and minuses. It does identify general interests, and in fact, it might tell you, like, give you a couple of different jobs. I think when I took it way back, it said being a mortuary technician,
Come on,
which I think maybe captures some of the people aspect of it, but it doesn't predict success on the job. It just predicts general interest categories. But you know what? I would say that even with that, there's some value, because anything that can start a conversation about life and about parnassa, I think is a good thing. And having that conversation earlier the best.
Absolutely. I think it's so, we did it for each of our children. And I want to tell you, when we started Project Yes back in 1997 with Rabbi Sheraz Zatzal, we had a list of 130 kids in the New York area who were in no school setting at all. And one of the things that we did is I got a grant to give them each career assessment. I'm sorry, I got the wrong word. Thank you for articulating the right word for it. And I was a little skeptical about when I first started this whole career assessment. Does it really work? What's a computer going to tell you? I sat down. It said I should be a high school teacher or um, or a guidance counselor. And I said, "Oh my goodness, this computer knows me."
Hmm.
So yeah, I absolutely agree with that. And we found with our children exactly what you said, that the process of sitting down at age 16, when friends aren't thinking about it, and just get them started towards thinking about a career. Um, Tell me about readiness, please. Like, what are the prerequisites? What makes someone who's looking to hire, uh, what 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 makes people, what gets their interest? What do the people need to have for job readiness?
Well, I think one of the realizations, and I actually, I was watching 60 Minutes before, and the very first story was about the economy and its effect on jobs. And when I saw the lead-in, I definitely wanted to watch it. And one of the points that they made was that, and something I've spoken about before, looking for a job is a lot of work, a lot of effort and energy, and is essentially a full-time job in and of itself. It's not something that can be done in a casual way. So that's one overall attitude that one needs to have. You can't just, dabble a little bit in this, dabble a little bit of that. It takes focus. It takes having a resume that's professionally written, and I think also in terms of one's attitude towards getting into a new endeavor. When we think about changes that we have to make to our life, to our routine, sometimes it's a little bit daunting, and we may be reluctant to do that because we're going to have to adjust this part of our schedule. We're going to have to switch from night Seder to a morning Seder if we want to maintain a certain regimen in learning. But everything in life is going to require some sort of adjustment. And I think that openness is to making those adjustments, not to be locked in, oh, I can't do that because, for example, I may have to work after 12 on a Friday. Well, the truth of the matter is the rest of the world in a 9-to-5 world is going to work full time, and you shouldn't be squandering an opportunity that presents itself because it's an adjustment that is foreign to what you previously did in the past. I would also say that, and this gets a little bit touchy within the Frum community, but I have discussed this with some very Frum, yeshivish, and even Hasidish individuals in doing my career counseling, and that is to consider a job outside of the Frum community. Now, sometimes I've heard some stories about people that work for Frum companies, unfortunately, where they have been taken advantage of in terms of their pay or their working conditions. And there might be some advantages working outside of the Frum community, very pragmatically in terms of salary and benefits, because maybe working for a government agency or working for a private company might come with a salary, pension, and benefits as opposed to just working an hourly without any benefits. So obviously, we have to always maintain our red lines in terms of our frumkeit, halacha, in some cases hashkafa, and background. But I think that there's a lot more opportunity out there that would fit into those parameters than people really think. So having just more of an openness to at least exploring, at least applying for those jobs, I think has a lot of value. And that's really also part of readiness and thinking outside of the box.
If I can go back, you mentioned about a professional mentor, about finding a mentor. I said, aseh l'charav. How would somebody go about that, and how would they know who would be? How would somebody, if people have connections, it's easier for them. But if someone's out there that isn't that keyed in, how How would you go about finding them?
Right. That's a good question. I think you gave an example, but maybe that's because of part of your connectivity where you were able to get your son an internship. And I think using, if those relationships exist, it doesn't necessarily have to be a father. It could be an uncle that knows somebody. It could be somebody in shul. But I think first of all, both the parent and the child and the young person have to at least be willing to take that first step to have that meeting. I happen to be a pretty avid networker, and I take advantage of all such opportunities. So where did my mentor come from? My mentor came from somebody who I know from the community who mentioned this person, and I made sure to seek him out at the next conference that I knew he was going to be there. Now, he just happens to be a very accomplished organizational psychologist. He lives in Teaneck. I'm not going to mention his name at this point. Unless he's watching, he may know who I'm talking about. And he really presented a really good mentor for me because he was somebody who was Shomer Shabbos, he's Kovei Itim in learning, and he's also at the top of his game. And I saw him. I spoke with him, very friendly. I think that many people think that mentors might not be always approachable. And I think that you'll find that professionals will be willing to give back, and they are approachable. So there's no one formula for finding a mentor. I have found sometimes just cold calling, quote unquote, or sending an email that's appropriately written to somebody. You find them on LinkedIn or some other search, and you just reach out to them in a very respectful, gracious way and express gratitude. That's a big part of being successful, expressing gratitude. And you'll find that most people are reasonable and will give up their time.
What would you say the sweet spot is for age in terms of looking for a mentor? Are you looking for someone who's just a few years older than you, someone close to retirement who has a little more time on their hands?
Well, it really depends on how old you are, because you can have a young person who's 21. If I were, I've never really been asked that question, but I would say 10 years older in terms of chronological age, because I think what that does is it gives enough of a spread where that person has been there, done that, and has achieved, and is maybe at the top of his or her game, and but yet is still relevant to you, still is connected in a way that is not too far, and that person can relate to you. You can relate to that person. So I would say I like the 10-year mark actually, but that doesn't mean that you can't have a mentor that's a few years older or 15 years older.
What would you recommend for jobs that someone who does not have a college degree, or jobs that don't require a college degree? And while we're at it, how important is, if you are going to college, how important is the right college? Obviously, it's a broad question for all types of jobs, but go ahead. So please.
So let me answer the second question first, because I think I'll just be able to position the answer a little bit better. I would say that it's not critical that someone goes to an Ivy League college to be successful, or some liberal arts college that is very popular to be successful. Very often there are local commuter colleges, and I'm just, to be a little bit personal about what I did in my journey, is I was learning in yeshiva, and there was an arrangement with the University of Maryland, and I was able to apply some credits from yeshiva towards my degree, but I was able to get a real bachelor's degree in psychology from University of Maryland. Now, when I went to graduate school, I was a little bit, I was a little bit anxious, because I was coming from a yeshiva background, and these other students that would be in my class were coming from some very good schools. But the truth is that if you have the basics, and I I was very privileged to have some good high school secular studies teachers that I still interacted with and asked questions about grammar after I got my PhD. I had such a relationship with that English teacher. But if you have the basics and you try hard and you develop an advisor, a mentor in college, a professor, somebody who can earn somebody who starts to respect you based on the work that you've done. I didn't think that my background, not coming from an Ivy League college, compromised me in any way. So I would say that a good college degree, a legitimate college degree, I think definitely helps, but it doesn't necessarily have to be from an Ivy League or that type of school. Your initial question that led into this was, what about people that either do not have a college degree, or for whatever reason, whether it's hashkafic or acumen or interest, they are not interested in going into college. So there are jobs out there. I would say one of the fields that has a good track record right now, and I think even moving forward, is going to be anything in IT and technology. I mean, we all have technology that we use all the time. We're using Zoom right now. We're all carrying, different devices and Zoom and tablets, and you have yeshivas now that are going online and using tablets and Zoom. So who's going to program them? So I think that is a very not necessarily lucrative, but I think that is stable. Now, how does somebody do that without a college degree? Well, first of all, there are different stages of college. You have community college, and then you have four-year college, and then you have graduate school. Many community colleges with let's say an associate's degree, which are not that many credits in the scheme of things, you can get some sort of certifications. And if you get that internship to get that foot in the door with the company or the government, I think that can be a very, very stable and secure career. Obviously, there's other areas of technology, more entrepreneurial. That's going to be a little bit more risky, but I believe that IT is one. Sales and business development is always going to be somewhat consistent, although the problem is that certain sectors will have their ups and downs. When you talk about sales, it could be insurance and real estate, and they have their ups and downs, but that is an area, if you have some connections with an organization, to get without a college degree. Of course, getting into some sort of business, sometimes it's a family business, sometimes somebody from the community will take you in, but just keep in mind that your growth potential without a college degree might be limited, because the owner of the business, of course, is going to be assuming the largest piece of risk in that organization, and they're not going to necessarily put you at the top of the pecking order. Healthcare, let's say healthcare, people who work as nursing assistants or nurses. Nurses, I think, is just an associate's type of degree, so that's going to be something that won't require a full college degree. And then, of course, for those who are inclined from schools, then maybe the more modern schools might require a bachelor's or a master's degree. There might be some opportunities for children who have the cheshek and the kishron to become rabbeim or rabbanim. That is possible without a college degree. But once again, there should be a conversation around that and some of the pluses and minuses of going into that profession.
Yeah. So far, this is perhaps the thing I could comment on with the most greatest level of intelligence. As a Rebbe myself, when my Talmidim would come back after Eretz Yisrael and say they wanted to go into chinuch, and I did this with one of our children who wanted to go into chinuch, I actually had them sit in on a classroom, and then I had them talk to young Rebbeim in their 30s about budgeting, what they have to give up. I said it's a labor of love. You have to really love it, and you have to understand that it comes with sacrifices. I actually got my son a job in the summer teaching one of my boys wanted to go into chinuch. I said, try it out in the summertime. Don't wait till you have a couple of kids to try this out. And I found sitting in on the younger rabbeim in my yeshiva was a really helpful thing for the kids to understand what it's about. The challenges and the tremendous opportunities. Look, I love it. I thank Hashem that I was able to earn my parnas in the thing that I love to do. How's this COVID-19 gonna affect the job market? And if also I read a few weeks ago about the young men and women who are in the job market for like 12 years or so, 10, 12 years, like this is their second, really tough spot, like in '08, remember those couple of years afterwards, the economy was really tanking. And like it's their second time around, the ones who are at that particular age. So what's it going to look like? I know you don't have a crystal ball, but
it is, I have to really punt on that question because I just don't know. What I can say, and I was watching this piece before, really heartbreaking. There was a person who really did everything right, went to somebody not from our faith, but it doesn't really matter. Someone who went to culinary school, started a catering business, and if anybody's in the kosher catering business, you kind of know the deal as well. The market has dried up, and it's unclear as to what's going to happen. There's not going to be any light switch that's going to go on from 10-person weddings to 350 people weddings where everybody's going to be sitting around the table and dancing together. That's not going to happen tomorrow. That's not going to happen in even a couple of months. Hopefully we'll get back to celebrating simchas in the way that we would like to with all of our friends, the Mehera. But it's really tough on some people. And I think that my mentor, actually, just to give you a quote from him, he mentioned something called, it's something that really has its basis in the military. It's called a VUCA world, VUCA. It's not Yiddish, that's an acronym.
Yes.
It stands for volatility, uncertainty, complexity, and ambiguity. And it's very unsettling when you think about each of those terms: volatility, uncertainty, complexity. There's so many things today that are so interconnected in terms of the supply chain of our food, and the credibility and the trust that we have in other people. And we have to trust other people that they're going to not infect us. And when we go into a restaurant, and it's just staggering. It's just staggering to think about it. So unfortunately, I don't really have a lot of answers in the crystal ball. But what I can say is that, believe it or not, there are industries that are still hiring. They're interviewing over Zoom, and they are hiring. Some of the areas like IT, healthcare. Unfortunately, one of the problems is with healthcare, it's dangerous. It's dangerous not being the patient, but it's dangerous being the healthcare provider. So these are industries that will always be here in some form, and we always need people to care for the vulnerable and to heal the sick. We all know Baruch Ruach Cholim, that Hashem is the one that ultimately heals the sick. But the messengers, the malachim who are down here on earth to do that work, those are decent jobs in a normal world. But in the new normal, it's a sakana for them. So even the jobs that are really decent jobs that people really worked hard to get to where they're at are compromised. The only thing we can do is just keep davening. We daven in biachidus, but we just have to daven. You mentioned before the davening for Parnasa with the Kohen Gadol, Baruch Aleinu. We say it every day, and we kind of just think, oh, it's, we say, did we say the same bracha, the same time? Did we say that right? But it's a bracha about Parnasa, and we have to really, maybe all of us, whether we have jobs or whether we're looking for jobs, we have to have extra kavanah in that bracha, because that's what it's all about. Of course, we have to be thankful and say modem with kavanah. We have to say everything with kavanah, but I think in today's times, it should give a newfound appreciation for the bracha of Baruch Aleinu.
Absolutely, absolutely. You'd mentioned just your idea of life activities. I know when we talked earlier. Can you just elaborate on that, about the things that incorporating them into a career?
Yeah. That's a good question. It's something that I've spoken about, that I think about, and I think it also can inform the conversation that parents should have with kids, because the way of the world is, and you can say it's always been this way, but I think we can, in contemporary terms, we can think about the various activities. Some of the things that we do are fun. Some of them, some of the activities in which we're involved will be enjoyable or give us fulfillment. There's some activities that we're passionate about, and there's some activities that will be making a difference in the community. And then we have those activities that might be none of the above, but help put food on the table. And it's very unrealistic to have a job, a single job, and maybe there's some fortunate people out there that have a single job that captures, I mentioned 5 different things that capture all 5 of those things. In most cases, there's going to have to be some compromise. And what I would say is, okay, if you have a career because you're good at it, and you get into a pathway for IT, for example, but you know what? At the end of the day, figuratively and literally, you don't feel that you're making a difference in the world, or you don't feel that you're getting sipa kanefesh. Now, maybe that's an opportunity when you get home, assuming you have some free time after that from your family, to get involved in klal work, volunteer, get involved in your shul, and you'll find that there definitely needs there. And that way, if you think about this as kind of a puzzle, kind of putting all the pieces together, so you have a job that pays the bills that you're good at least you got 2 out of the 5, and then explore other areas of your life. And this is also a conversation that you should have with your kids, and you should have with your spouse, and think about it. How valuable the role modeling would be, where a person is working 9 to 5 in an IT job, has a seder maybe before davening in the morning, and in the evening is a president of the shul, or the head of, or volunteering for Hatzalah. I mean, you think about chinuch and the partnership between the school and the home. The father becomes not just the father, but becomes the Rebbe, not because of the father-son learning that they do, because he has to make a Hatzalah call on Shabbos and save somebody's life. I mean, that's tremendous. And that can make an incredible impression on the child to maybe go into some of that klal work. So I think it's a matter of trying to kind of sift all of these things and parse them out, and find a career that you'll have a certain amount of cheshek for, that you'll get maybe some enjoyment out of. It may not be fun. You may need to go to the baseball game, or be in a basketball league on Wednesday night. But I would say that it's important for parents to communicate. Hello?
Yeah, I'm sorry. I thought I don't know if it was me. I just missed that.
Okay.
If your parents should communicate.
should communicate, hopefully early on, that not every job is going to have all of those elements. We'll figure out ways of supplementing, that's a good word, to supplement what you're doing in your day job with other activities that will hopefully satisfy most. It's unrealistic to say that at any given point in time you'll have all 5 covered, but at least maybe have 3 or 4 of them covered, and I think that would give a person a certain sense of satisfaction and put food on the table.
I think it's really you raised so many helpful tips. Before we go, do you have any websites that parents could go to learn a little bit more about some of the things you're talking about, or that would have resources that they could follow up on? Anything come to mind?
Nothing really comes to mind. I guess if I'm thinking about resources for looking for jobs or for professional networking, some of the things that I'm thinking of, I'm a very big fan of LinkedIn. I think that out of all the social media, that tends to be, although I can't say with, it's 100%, but I would say that it is a great networking tool. It also allows you to look for jobs. There are job boards out there. One is on LinkedIn. Indeed.com is a very big job board.
Indeed.
ZipRecruiter. Indeed, yes. Yes, indeed. Indeed.com is the website. And it's got listings of many jobs. Also, if you have, maybe an organization, a company, usually it's going to be a larger company in which you're interested, and you want to prepare, let's say, to apply for a job there. It's always good to do some advanced research before you apply through the website, but also before you go in for the interview. Do your research on what the company does and all that. If anybody has any specific questions, I'm happy to respond to an email about specific resources. Usually the best resources are going to be industry specific or field specific instead of the ones that are very general.
Okay, thank you so very much. Just one final thought to parents. Like I mentioned earlier, speak up, speak to your children, and articulate what your values are. The earlier, the better. Elly, my father, when I graduated high school, I wanted to go to Eretz Yisrael, and he said he told me that he's not. He said, Yankee, you're an idealist, you're a dreamer. You have to be prepared that you're not gonna want to come back and go to school. He said, I don't want you cannot go. He said, you cannot go until you have some sort of parnasa. And I actually went to my Rebbe, Rav Pam, and he said, Abba told me, he said, why don't you go talk it over with Rav Pam? Let me know if he disagrees with me. You start to go on Kedushin, I have enough responsibility to teach you parnasa, to give you parnasa. And Rav Pam said, your father's right. And I actually went in Williamsburg, I went to a jewelry class for 4 months, and so that I would have something. He refused to let me go until I had some sort of parnasa, a baseline parnasa. And I think I really encourage parents to speak to your children. Dr. Elly, thank you so very much for your time.
I just have to react to that. Obviously Rav Pam was one of the Gedolim of yesteryear, and I think part of his godless, and I don't think I have to sell him to you or anybody listening,
certainly not
is
to me.
the fact that he saw his role in that particular question, that particular situation, as a shutuf rather than as a Rosh Hashiva. He was a shutuf in your development and your best interest, and it was a team. And I don't think your father called him to tell him, what to say to you. I don't think he gave him a spoiler alert as to what was going to happen. But I think he just recognized, and I think the true Gedolim will be able to recognize that it's not a conflict, but it's a partnership. And I think when you mentioned before about the choosing of a high school and choosing of a yeshiva, that is just so, so critical, that it is that partnership. And because I've witnessed cases over the course of my career where that alignment was not there, and it comes back to bite people years later.
And the follow-up to that, you're 100% right, Dr. Elly. You're spot on always with everything. But the other point is that yeshivas are so much larger, Baruch Hashem, than they were when we went to yeshiva. You mentioned that you have a Rebbe, right? A lot of the kids, and I think it's important for parents when they select high school and Beis Medrash, is it too large that they're not going to have a kesher with the Rebbe, or to direct them and encourage them, even in a huge yeshiva like the Mir, they have lots of Rebbeim there that have a kesher with the guys, 30 years later, 20 years later. So I think that's also an important part of all of this, is that the kids should look for a Rebbe and the parents should encourage them to get it. Dr. Elly, thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate it.
You're welcome.
Thank you for listening. I hope you
My pleasure.
found this helpful. Have a good night, everyone. Thank you.
Good night.
Bye.